Hello, everyone. I want to thank everyone for being here today and joining this very important event. The IRGC has revealed their cowardice through attacks on women. And we've recently seen similar violence from its proxies like Hamas against women in Israel. Now more than ever, it's vital to unite against these terrorist organizations. And we must remember that we share the same enemy and goals: justice for women of Iran and for victims of sexual violence perpetrated by the Islamic regime and all its proxies. My name is Natalie Sanandaji, and as a proud Jewish Persian American, I'm honored to be hosting this event. And I hope for a free Iran, free from tyranny. Today, we will hear from a distinguished lineup of speakers, activists, scholars, and community leaders who will share their experiences and insights on Iran's oppressive regime. Their testimonies aim to unite action against the human rights abuse in Iran. Thank you all for joining from around the world. I'm honored to introduce our first speaker, an incredible advocate, Marzieh Amirizadeh. Marzieh is an Iranian American who immigrated to the US after being sentenced to death by hanging in Iran for the crime of converting to Christianity. She endured months of mental and physical hardship and intense interrogation in Evin prison, one of the most brutal prisons in the world. And she has shared her inspiring story around the world to bring awareness about the ongoing human rights violations perpetrated against women and religious minorities in Iran. Marzi, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about, your experience, what you went through, kind of what you experienced firsthand that women are still experiencing today in Iran. Things that we don't hear about on the news.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for giving me this opportunity to share my story and what I witnessed firsthand living in Iran. I was born in Iran a few months before the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Which started by college students who believed in Marxism, socialism, communism, and they were brainwashed by radical Muslims to support a fanatic Muslim, Khomeini, come to power. And since then, the Iranian people, especially women, lost all their rights. And it started exactly from a very young age, at the age of 7, for example, when a girl goes to school, they have to follow the Islamic rules, and they force them to compulsory hijab. I can share a little bit, briefly about the stories that I witnessed myself. For example, the first day of my school, I was beaten and insulted by the supervisor of the school just because of not covering all my hair under my scarf, and also laughing loudly in the yard of the school. And later in high school, I witnessed one of my classmates. She was dragged out of the class just because of doing her eyebrow. The supervisor of the school came to the class and dragged her out of the class, called her a whore because she was not allowed to touch her face before her marriage. So these are just 2 examples. There are many other stories and examples that I shared in both my books, Captive in Iran and A Love Journey with God, to explain how is the life of women living under the rules of radical Muslims and the Islamic Republic regime. And women systematically in Iran are getting suppressed, assaulted, and being abused sexually and in different areas of the society, at schools. And later I I was witness firsthand in prison, hearing many shocking stories what happened to women. And it was in 2009 that I myself with my friend, we were arrested just because of believing in Jesus, being a Christian. We were in prison for almost 9 months. We were sentenced to death by hanging. And I myself witnessed firsthand violence against women and how they were being tortured, beaten. And the first 14 days of my arrest, I was imprisoned in a small jail, which is underground dungeon. And it's the same jail, the same place that Mahsa Amini in 2022 were beaten brutally because of not having a proper Islamic hijab, which led to her death. And the regime murdered her simply because of not having a proper Islamic hijab. And I was in that same place in 2009. And I was witness how many women are getting arrested simply because of by morality police in the streets, just because of not following the Islamic rules, not having a proper Islamic hijab, wearing, colorful clothes, having nail polish, crazy reasons. And also I heard tons of stories later in the public, another prison, Evin prison, which they transferred me to that prison after being 14 days in that horrible jail, that it was honestly, I can't describe what kind of place was that. I shared a little bit in both my books, in my interviews, that it was like underground dungeon, just small, very small cells that they would lock women and beaten them up, tortured them, and they humiliated them. For example, they forced us to being naked right in front of their eyes a few times in different prisons, and forcing us to do sit up many times, and just to humiliate us as women. And in Evin prison again, when I was there, I witnessed the rape, sexual violence against my cellmates. For example, they locked me for 40 days in 209 solitary cells, and I was with another girl. She was only 18 years old. And every time she would go for interrogation, she would come back in tears and shaking and too much fear because of being abused sexually. And she shared with me that her interrogator abused her verbally and by his behavior, and she had the fear of being raped in one of those interrogations, which every time I had to pray for her when they were taking her for interrogation. And another story I can share, the story of Reyhaneh Jabbari, which is a prominent story all around the world. And there's a film about it, 7 Winters in Tehran. And Reyhaneh Jabbari, I met in person. She was a beautiful girl that was arrested at the age of 19. She was in prison for 7 years, and she was tortured, sexually abused for many years, and her crime was only to self-defense against her rapist, who was a part of the security intelligence in the government. And finally, after 7 years, they brutally executed her. Another story is one of my cellmates. She was in the public world. She shared with me she was working. She wanted to get a job in prison because she was poor. She didn't have anyone to support her. And finally, she was able to get a job in the clinic in prison. And after that, a few days after that, I could see how she was getting depressed. And I went to her and I asked her what's going on. You always wanted to get a job to support yourself. And she was all the time, she was crying in secret, and she shared with me shocking story. And she said, Marzi, my job in that clinic is giving sex to IRGC commanders and the prison officials who are coming to prison to have meeting. And I was shocked to hear that. And she said she talked to prison authority and told her that she doesn't want to go back to the clinic, but they threatened her life and told her, if you resist and going back to clinic and sleeping there, if you share this with anyone, you will lose your life. And usually they target women like her that have nobody outside prison. They are poor, they don't have family member, and use them as sexual sex slave for their authorities. I was lucky because my friend and I, because our case got international attention and many people started advocating for us. That's why they didn't rape us, praise God, or sexually abuse us in that level that other prisoners shared with me. Another girl that I talked to her, she shared her story that for months she was another jail, and she shared that how they tortured her, and she lifted up her pants and showed me the mark of the cable all over her body. And she shared with me that many times they raped her in that jail before transferring to Evin prison. And my close friend Shirin Alamhuli was another example that she was tortured for months, for years in prison, and they kept her in another place, and for months they tortured her. They kicked her to her stomach, they hung her from a ceiling and beat her, they hit her head to the wall many times, and finally they executed her. And I strongly believe they raped her before her execution, because there is a fatwa by Ayatollah Khomeini that virgin girls must be raped before their execution, because they believe that if they execute a single woman, she will go to heaven. And by raping those women, they refuse for them to go to heaven. So there are many examples, and you yourself witness that kind of violence in Israel on October 7th, that how the proxies of the regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of these terrorists are supported by the Islamic Republic regime, and they train the same way to other terrorists to treat women, and many Israeli women. We heard that you were another victims and witness to what happened in Israel on October 7th, that many women were raped and sexually abused by terrorists before taking their life. So this is the system of Islamic Republic regime, and they keep doing that. And every day women are getting suppressed for different crazy reasons, and sexual abuse is a kind of tactic and tool against women to create fear and to control women to obey the Islamic rules. And there are many other areas that we can discuss about it, that the legal system of Iran is against women. Women do not have any rights, and they are discriminated against in everything. Their values, their inheritance, their witness in the court is half of men. They can't get a job like being in the court, important job in the government. And there are many things against women that we can discuss about each one of them. That, for example, if women ride a bicycle, they may get arrested and put in prison. There are rules against women, that they are not allowed to sing, they are not allowed to dance, they can't have the custody of their own children. For example, one of my friends, she got divorced, and it's been 7 years that her husband took the child, and she's suffering because she can't see her child. So these are just a few examples, and the life of Iranian women every day is in danger, and they try to threaten them. For example, for following the Islamic rules, another tactic that they use, throwing acid in the face of women who do not follow the Islamic rules. There are many Iranian women who their face ruined, their beauty was ruined by Basiges, and that way they try to create fear. And if women show their objections, participate in any protest against the regime, standing for their rights, they will get arrested, and they will put them in prison and torture them, rape them, and sexually abuse them. So this is something ongoing in Iran, and I urge the international community to stand with Iranian people who are fighting for their rights every day and empowering their voice. For example, that makes me very disappointed when I see that secular media and international community try to suppress the voice of people like me and many other victims. During the protests, for example, many women were shot in their eyes. They lost their eyes and their beauty. And the international community, instead of suppressing the voice of people like me and many other victims, we are not just victims, we are fighting against this Islamic Republic regime. And there are many other women, as I shared a few examples, they have nobody. No one can share their stories. So the international community should support people like us to be a voice for those women who are suffering and who are fighting for their freedoms every day.
Marzia, first I want to say thank you so much for sharing not just your firsthand experiences, but the experiences of friends, of people that you knew. And you made such an important point when you were speaking, that you were lucky that because there was attention brought to what you were going through, the regime felt kind of a pressure to not do to you what they did to so many other women. And I think that's such an important point for our viewers to realize, is that we need to be their voice. We need to stand up for them because they don't have a voice, because they're being tortured, because they're experiencing that pain and that struggle firsthand by the regime, and they don't have a voice. They don't have the kind of the rights that we do to speak out and say whatever we want to say without the fear of being killed, of being raped, of being thrown in jail. So I think that's such an important point that you made, that because you had people be a voice for you, you were able to escape that. And that's what we're doing today, is we're trying to be a voice for all those women. And I just want to say thank you again so much for coming on, for sharing. I know that it's not easy to share these kinds of stories, and we really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much. And we are going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Jacqueline Saper. Jacqueline was born in Tehran to an Iranian father and a British mother, and lived through the systematic shift of the modern monarchy to the rule during 1979 of the Iranian Revolution. Her memoir, From Miniskirt to Hijab, A Girl in Revolutionary in Iran, chronicles her transformation from a young woman enjoying cultural freedom to one forced to wear the hijab under the oppressive Islamic Republic. Jacqueline, thank you so much for coming on today, and thank you for also, going into painful memories and sharing with us what you went through.
Thank you, Natalie, for hosting this event and for having me on this distinguished panel. As you mentioned, I belong to a distinct generation because I fully experienced imperial Iran when Iran was a secular monarchy. I came of age in that era. And when I was in the last year of my high school, I went through the Iranian Revolution. And then I lived in the Islamic Republic of Iran for 8 years, where I experienced both misogyny and anti-Semitism. And I married there. I had 2 children in the Islamic Republic until my family fled in 1987. Talking about hijab, as my book title is From Miniskirt to Hijab, that's exactly how my life was. I wore the latest fashion. I grew up in a modern society. And when the revolution succeeded, and Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Iran, I was in my last year, senior year of high school. And on March 8, 1979, a month after Khomeini arrived in Iran, he gave a decree that all women, it first started for employed women who were employed, that they had to wear mandatory hijab. And I went to a Jewish day school, Etefaq, which was adjacent to University of Tehran. And from my classroom, I saw hundreds of thousands of women protesting this mandatory hijab. But some of my classmates participated. They came back to school with horrified looks because they were attacked by knife or broken glass. And from that time, this hijab was enforced on women. Obviously, it wasn't enforced immediately. It took almost 2 years for the hijab law to be enforced by, as Marzia mentioned, by throwing acid on women's faces, the fear that we endured, and the morality police. I personally was approached by morality police. I was, at that time, this was about 1982. I was walking in the Farah Park, a public park in Tehran, and the morality police came forward. They demanded to look into my sack, whatever I was carrying, and then she just started extremely rude, swearing at me, calling me a whore for not wearing proper hijab. And then there was a van by the side of the street. There was a man standing behind her. I saw he was approaching something tucked under his shirt. And I was going to do anything not to be arrested and taken by the van. So I apologized profusely, and I promised I would wear proper hijab, and I was let go. I was fortunate to be let go with a warning. But we have heard many stories of the morality police, specifically about Mahsa Amini 2 years ago, which brought up the movement of women, life, freedom. Basically, the impetus for us leaving, as Marzia mentioned, she went to school. When my daughter entered first grade at the age of 6, she had to wear the hijab. And it was very painful for me because I had seen the other side of Iran not wearing the hijab. And hijab is just a piece of cloth. Is, as Marzia also mentioned, the law changed very much against women. Family laws, marriage age became less. Women had much less rights than they had before. A man has as she said, the man has the custody rights, more double inheritance than women. A woman's testimony in court is half of a man, and it goes on. We had favorite celebrity singers. Women could not sing anymore in public, can't dance, can ride a bike. Things we take as granted in the West as women are so limited and restricted in that part of the world. And actually, Iran and Afghanistan are the only 2 countries in the world that hijab is mandatory. And it's not by choice, but they have to wear it. Currently, with the passing of 45 years, there's a new generation in the country. The population of Iran during the revolution was 35 million. Today is almost 90 million. The majority of Iranian population are young. There is a big disconnection with the elderly leadership. And with the advent of social media and technology, we can see what's happening there. The generation there knows what's happening there outside the country, and they take films and videos of protests and what's happening, and we know what's going on simultaneously. So we just, I think we should be the voice of the women there and the men who are supporting them, because how you dress is a privilege that should be granted to women by choice, not by force.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. We actually had someone just comment saying that she just finished reading your book. And I really do think it's so important for people to hear what Iran was like pre the revolution. And Marzia also mentioned that this really started with the brainwashing of young students. And I really do think it's important to point out that a lot of people who lived through the revolution in Iran are seeing a big kind of pattern with what's happening here in the United States currently. And it is very worrying, but it's amazing that we have so many strong speakers who are speaking out today and sharing their stories and really showing all of our viewers kind of those patterns. Next, I want to welcome Arash Hamedian. Arash was born in Iran. It has been 15 years since he has moved to Europe and has been an activist against the criminal mullah regime, the Islamic regime of Iran, and participates and organizes events and demonstrations against the regime, trying to bring awareness to the media. Arash is also in contact with the Iranian diaspora worldwide, and after October 7th, in a big pro-Israel demonstration, Arash was the first Iranian to hold the lion and the sun flag to support Israel after the attacks that occurred on October 7th. Arash, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's really an honor to have you, especially as someone who survived October 7th. You know, it's incredible to see my fellow Iranians and all the support that they've shown for Israel, and Israel showing support for all the Iranians as well. So thank you for coming on, and we would love to hear more about what you've been doing and what you've experienced in regards to the regime.
Thank you so much. It is my profound honor and pleasure to be among all the distinguished speakers here, and thank you and all the organizers of this initiative. I am not going to repeat what the other honorable speakers already said. I second them all, and unfortunately, this is true. The situation of women in Iran under this terrorist regime. And there are philosophers who say if you want to destroy a society, destroy the position of women in the family and in the society, so that then you will easily destroy that society. And unfortunately, since this regime took over Iran, the first target of the regime were women, the core of the family, the core of the society. So, and they cut that 50% of the society, all their rights, and of course they are not alone. They have so many supporters, this regime, and from east to the west, because of the economic interests. As our dear speakers before said, the international media or so-called humanitarian organizations, many of them, not all of them, are not promoting true voices of Iranian women and and they are just picking up, they choose who they want to promote as a hero of women's rights, as a political prisoner, as a Nobel Peace Prize winner for Iran. I don't want to talk, I don't want to generalize it and to bring it to other places, but unfortunately about Iran, it's always the wrong choice, always the wrong promotion. And the lobbies of the regime are very strong in Europe and the US, and they are always misrepresenting the Iran concept and the narrative about Iran. Like the majority of Iranian people inside and outside Iran, the diaspora, support Prince Reza Pahlavi for a democratic Iran, for a real democratic Iran and freedom and peace with everyone. But they always censor it, and they don't never talk about it. They promote irrelevant characters and irrelevant subjects to distract the public opinion. And what we are trying to do with our experiences, because I have been under pressure myself in Iran. I know that it's not comparable, the pressure on the woman of Iran with the man, but also the man are all the rights of the Iranian citizens have been taken away from them. Like if you are Iranian, you don't have so much right to live in Iran. You should be something else in a category of this regime to be able to go on, but it's very inhuman and very corrupt and very dirty. So out of the pressure inside Iran, in Europe, I always also had so many bad experiences, and so I have been so many times under attacks, even physical attacks, bureaucratic discriminations or blackmails by the lobbies of the regime. And after many years and experiences and connecting with different opposition groups, we are kind of in contact now worldwide, and we are trying now to communicate with people like in Israel, with pro-Israeli groups or opposition groups, moderate groups from the Middle East who are moderate and secular, who want to have peace, to create an alliance and to bring awareness. Because our first contacts, we have recognized that unfortunately there is completely no proper awareness among people of the countries that many people think that all Iranian people are against Israel, or all Iranian people support Hezbollah and Hamas. And this is really a huge gap here. We are trying to work on this, bring awareness in different languages, to create the base for the Middle East, to so the people of the Middle East have more awareness. And from the other side also, we are trying to communicate with the politicians. Unfortunately, here in Europe, there is always so much ignorance, and like they pretend that they are not hearing us. But we are trying. And in the US, I know our dear friends are doing a great job there too. You and other speakers I hear, I know other groups are trying very much. So we are hoping that this can advance, and hopefully this regime can go away as soon as possible, because they are the core of the problem. If they survive, another October 7 will happen. If they survive, definitely, maybe now they are weak, they play down for 6 months, 1 year, but it will definitely happen. It's in their genes, it's in their DNA. So we really hope, and we try, and we do our best. And thank you so much again. I hope the listeners here, when I see many of them, they say why the international media don't talk about it, why they do. So please be our voices, please bring our voices to the world. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arash. And you really made such a good point that the international media, they want people to believe a different narrative. They want people to believe that we're separated. And that's something I experienced a lot growing up. When I would tell people my mother's Israeli, my father is Iranian, people would ask me, what is it like to be from two countries that hate each other? And I would always have to explain to people, they don't hate each other. One country has a government that really hates all democracy, not just Israel. But that government does not represent the people at all. And that's something that I would constantly teach people. And I would be happy to be that person to teach that. And it's so amazing that we have all of you here teaching that to all of our listeners today. It really is such an important point to drive home that we're not enemies. We never were. And we now have the same enemy, and we're coming together to fight that enemy. And it's such a beautiful, amazing thing to see. And with that, driving that point home, I would also like to introduce our next speaker, someone that is very dear to me, Sarah Raviani. Sarah is an Iranian American activist. She first became vocal after the killing of Mahsa Amini by the Iranian morality police, and is shaped by her family's experience fleeing Iran after the 1979 revolution. Knowing firsthand the terror the regime has brought upon the Iranian people has been a catalyst for her opposition to the Islamic regime. Sarah, I'm giving the stage to you. It's so nice to see you today. Thank you for joining us.
So nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me. This is a really important conversation, and it's one that's very near and dear to my heart. I believe oftentimes human rights become an afterthought in a lot of these conversations, but what people fail to realize is the people of the Middle East just want peace. They just want to live, men, women alike, and especially this young generation that is growing up not only in Iran, but I see it in Iraq, in Syria, in Israel. Everyone just wants to have a peaceful future. And this is something that I believe that the Western world does not understand. The Western world believes that, you know, the Middle East is basically a different planet. And I think that that's a huge disservice. The women of Iran are no different than me. The only difference is that I was born in the United States and they were born in Iran. I talked to so many young women day in and day out inside of Iran, and they tell me, Sarah, we're living in hell. And I don't think people understand just how dire the situation is. Women in Iran are being killed for not covering their hair. The men of Iran are being killed for standing up for the women. Just yesterday, a US national, Jimmy Shahmad, was killed by the Islamic regime in Iran. And it's so tragic because this pain is so far reaching. His daughter advocated for years for her father's return. And instead of listening, it fell on deaf ears and it could have been avoided. There was a hostage deal that took place in 2023, and the only hostage in Iran with its looming death sentence over his head was killed and left behind by our administration. Our government left him behind. And this is something that is so hypocritical when people claim to care about women's rights and human lives, and they leave Americans behind to die. And this affects all of us. This affects everyone. And I want people to understand that the people of Iran are so different than the regime. Like I said earlier, human rights oftentimes become an afterthought, but we don't drive home the point enough that the Iranian people are not the regime that occupies them. And in fact, they are so different. Like I just said, the youth of Iran are exactly like me. There's no difference between me and those kids that are living inside of Iran. All they want is a future of freedom and peace. They don't want to be a part of the regime's war of terror across the entire Middle East. They want to grow up and live good lives, but they have no futures because of what this regime has done. And that's the biggest tragedy. And I think that if you claim to care about human rights and women's rights, then it starts with also caring about the people of the Middle East and understanding that they want peace and prosperity just like the rest of us.
Thank you so much, Sarah. You made so many good points. And we had a few questions about, pre-revolution Iran. I think it's so important. Most people, I would say most Americans, they don't realize how different Iran was before the revolution. And I think one good example that I can give to really drive home what Iran was like was that my uncle, whose parents are Iranian, but he was born in Israel. When he finished the army, he did a trip all over Europe, and his last stop was Iran. So first of all, that just goes to show you Israelis could freely travel to Iran before the revolution. And he always told me Iran was more beautiful and more fun than all of Europe. So I think that really drives home what Iran was like before the revolution, how different it was. And someone asked, how did this revolution start? And we spoke about the fact it was really the manipulation of young people and promising something very different than what they received in return. And a lot of those young people that were part of the revolution, they're now adults who really regret being part of that revolution. They were really tricked. And I think it's so important to remember that fact and remember that it's very scary. We're seeing something very similar in the United States today. And we really need to be that voice. We really need to help represent the Iranian people because they're not going to talk about them in the media. They're not going to talk about what the regime is doing to their own people. Nobody's hearing about this. And with that, I want to go to our next speaker, Farnam. Farnam was also, as well as Sarah, was also on our last event, and it's an honor to have you back. Thank you so much for coming on. Farnham is dedicated to putting maximum pressure on the European Union and superpower countries in the form of holding demonstrations and consulting with representatives of these parliaments until reaching a conclusion and transition from the Islamic Republic. So thank you so much, first of all, for all that you do for the Iranian people, and thank you for coming on today.
Hello, Natalie. Thank you so much for having me again. I want to start by talking about the long history between Iran and the Jewish people. Their connection goes back over 2,000 years, starting with Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire, who helped the Jewish people in the 6th century BCE. Today, Iran Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is trying to build a positive relationship with Israel again. His recent visit to Israel has brought hope that Iranians and Israelis could have a peaceful relationship. He wants a Middle East very country respects each other, but the current Islamic Republic government often uses harsh policies to keep people divided. For example, they recently executed Jamshid Sharma, an Iranian German journalist, to death because he has spoke out against the government. This shows how the government tries to silence people who want peace and unity. I believe that if Iran is led by the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who support Iranians' history of tolerance and respect for other nations, it can lead to peace and a stronger partnership in the region. Finally, I want to send my condolences to the family of Jamshid Sharma, who was executed yesterday by the Islamic Republic. I hope that Germany's Foreign Minister, Annabella Baerbock, will now respect his family wishes and help them bring his body back for a proper burial according to his beliefs. And thank you so much, Natalie. And I'm sorry about I started late because I'm at work, and here is very noisy and I'm very busy. But because I promise you for the second event, so I'm here to see you, Ms. Raviani, and another friends. And only I come to say hello to your political activist friends, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. And Farnham also made a very good point. You know, the government really wants to keep us separated, and it really is true that even for me, I realize that I have to be that voice for a lot of the Israeli audience. I think I'm in a very interesting position because as an advocate for Israel since October 7th, and as someone with an Iranian last name, I get a lot of messages from the Iranian diaspora. And I think the most messages of love and support that I've received throughout this entire year are from Iranians, which is so amazing and so beautiful. And they just tell me how much they love Israel and how much they want peace between all of us. And with that, I am going to go to our next speaker, who's also a dear friend, Elahe Jamali, which some of you might know her online as Lily Moo. Elahe is a passionate advocate for human rights and social justice. With a background in medical biochemistry, born in Iran and raised in England, Elahe brings a unique perspective to her activism, drawing from her diverse cultural experiences. Elahe, it's such a pleasure to have you on again, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natalie June. Thank you, Durud, to everyone. Just like our other speakers, I want to send my deepest condolences to my friend Ghazal Shahmat and her dear family. They've been working relentlessly every day for the past 4 years trying to bring Jamshid back home, but the atrocities that the regime places upon us, Iranians, dissidents, whether in Iran or outside, anybody who speaks against this regime is in danger of kidnapping and murder, as we have witnessed yesterday in a very devastating manner that Jamshid is now no longer with us. Thank you so much for having me. I am a human rights activist. I'm a women's rights advocate, and since Mahsa was murdered at the hands of the morality police, all of my life has been about bringing more awareness to the international community towards Iranians suffering at the hands of the regime. And as a lot of you already know, since what happened in October 7th of 2023, my activities have doubled in a sense that the enemy is no longer just within the borders of Iran, killing Iranians. It's openly showing to the international community what it is capable of. And October 7th was a perfect example of that. The atrocities committed against Israeli, Jewish, Arab, and Druze women and men is a great example of the atrocities and violations that this regime is willing to commit, whether it's through its own hands or its proxies. Natalie has been working so hard trying to build a bridge in the diaspora between Iranians and Israelis and the international community to show this bond and connection between us. And I'm very honored to be here. Also, Sarah Rabiani, you're fantastic. Shirin Yadgar, you're amazing. Every single one of you here who is working so hard to bring awareness regarding the atrocities of this regime against our incredible people in Iran. Every single one of you is working so hard, and you have so very difficult and hard, and you have my full respect and admiration. Honestly, I wish I could do a little, just a little like you all. So thank you. If there's any questions you have regarding my recent activities or what's been happening in Iran, by all means, please ask, and I'm all yours.
So we did have one question, maybe Ella, if you want to kind of answer this, but some people are confused as to how we got to this place in Iran. How did the revolution happen, and how did it escalate to this point where women were stripped of all of their rights? How was Iran once considered it was considered like the Paris of the Middle East?
Absolutely.
How did we get to this point? Because the fact that we got to this point is, I think it makes a lot of people fearful that even a place like America could get to this point. And maybe you can go into that a little bit.
You said it so well. America is actually at risk of such a revolution, and people are not really waking up to this matter. Because what happened in 1979, it was brewing in the back doors of the universities in Iran with the whispers of Leninism and Marxism and this and that, oh, how to overthrow the Shah and let's all be commoners. The Shah called himself Shah and Shah, meaning the Shah of all kings, because he saw his own people as a Shah himself. And what we saw in 1979 was a marriage of Marxists and Islamists getting together to overthrow a system that was functional, and it stood for nations. However, there is this idea of globalization of whatever the ideology. Now, you see, the Islamists want to have an Islamic caliphate around the world, and the Marxist communist globalists want to see a one nation state for the entirety of the globe under one totalitarian regime that's full on dystopia. It's unattainable, and it's very risky. It only gives room for anarchy. In 1979, when the revolution took place, or as we Iranians call it, the riot of the 79, the Marxists and the communists did all of the operational movements, and then the Islamists came over and they took over, because in a place where holiness is above all, and they believe they have holy rights to do whatever atrocities they want to do, they commit those atrocities. And in that sense, they committed 30,000 public executions or group executions against anybody who was against them, whether it was the original just civilian Iranians who said no to the Islamic Republic and didn't want that and were siding with the Shah of Iran, or the communists who helped facilitate the Islamic Republic's uprising and coming into place. They went and murdered every single one of them in a mass execution. The Islamic Republic's goal is this imperialist Islamist idea, and its first, number one, most strongest enemy in a society is an independent woman. And that is why we are witnessing a gender apartheid in Iran, because a woman in its entire existence is seen as an enemy. And this enemy is being confronted by the Islamic Republic, not only through the male militias who are in the forms of the Basij, the morality police, or the IRGC. It is also being attacked. Iranian women are being attacked by other brainwashed, self-selling idiots who are siding with the regime of misogyny in order to keep this oppression on other women and apartheid in place. It's a religious gender apartheid. It's a gender apartheid imposed on Iranian women used by a religious force. And this religious force is using women to kill and hurt other women. Like, for example, who do you think allows for little girls to go and become brides to older men in whatever village they go and indoctrinate into this child marriage madness? Women, submissive, uneducated, or sort of self-hating women who want to see, because they haven't grown, they want to see the rest of the society submitting to that level of oppression. And by doing so, they are giving the very strong tool to the Islamic Republic to oppress other women along the way. That is why we have UN Women denying the atrocities against women elsewhere. Because within the UN, there are Iranian women, well, so-called Iranian, that we call them the traitors of Iran. Iranian women who go and represent the Islamic Republic, and then they go and read statements like, oh, Iranian women are free, they have education. Yes, they do. They are intellectual beings and they refuse to be oppressed. So in spite of the oppression, they have education. And then they go and say, we have female judges in Iran. Yes, we do, but these are the kind of judges you have in place who are oppressing other women so that the mullahs and the Ayatollah can stay in place. We have to open our eyes to the position that the Islamic Republic is placing women in, and how that is being portrayed and used against us. Just women against women is one thing, but the entire system that is saying that women have religiously half the right of a man. Based on that religious right, Sharia law in place in Iran, women will have, imagine, technically speaking, an unmarried woman in Iran, based on the Sharia law, has to have a chaperone to go around. If it wasn't for the determination and the independence of the Iranian woman that has existed in spite of the past 45 years of oppression, this would be in place right now, everywhere in Iran. So the university encampments that we see against this so-called imperialist West is only a sense of a deep-rooted self-harm and self-hate that needs to be addressed. It's honestly, I see it as a mental health issue. Respect, a little bit of respect goes a long way. Iranian people refuse to accept that a bunch of idiots, I'm sorry I'm using such foul language if I may, absolute lunatic extremists took over our country 45 years ago. 96% of Iranians could not fathom and believe such a reality is going to fall upon them. That very shadow is now in the West. Is creeping everywhere, and it's coming out of the most intellectual, high-profile academic spaces in the world. So,
you know, it's truly, I'm so happy that we've driven this point so many times during this talk, is the fact that the West is next, in the sense that we're the next being brainwashed. And I saw an example of that when I made a video with a Jewish influencer in Washington Square Park, and we asked people if they thought that October 7th was justified. And one boy that we asked if October 7th was justified, he said yes. And then he went to say, Iran tried to send rockets to Israel, but unfortunately they didn't succeed. And then I asked him, you wish that Iran succeeded, but Iranians don't even want their government to succeed. So why do you want them to? And it just shows how deep rooted this brainwashing is. And it really, I think it for so many people who suffered under the hand of the regime and had to flee because of the regime, they're now questioning whether or not they have a future here in the United States. But hopefully with the help of amazing activists like you, maybe we can make a change. Maybe we can open people's eyes. Maybe we can make them see before it's too late. And a lot of our viewers asked, how can they help? To all of our viewers, as you heard multiple times, you know, this is this constant threat on the lives of innocent people who are trying to speak out. Up until today, Jamshid was murdered. And so many people did try to speak out on his behalf, but sometimes speaking out really does make a difference. Sometimes we do manage to help these innocent, beautiful souls. So what you can do is you can follow all of these activists on social media, Elahe or Lily Moo, Marzieh, Sarah, Jacqueline, Arash, Farnam, all of you. They're all amazing activists. They are all constantly posting about people whose lives are in danger, people who are beautiful souls and beautiful activists stuck under the regime in Iran. And through that, you can help support, you can help be another voice. So you can all go and follow them. We've also pre-recorded this event, and we'll be sending it to everyone so that all of our listeners today can share it with people who didn't have a chance to join right now. Share it on your social media, share their voices, share their profiles, so you can all help be another voice. I really want to thank everyone who joined today, who joined this powerful event, this powerful demonstration against the Iranian government. And I just want to say thank you for your courage, because it really takes courage to speak out against such a regime. And I just want to say I'm so grateful to know all of you and to be able to speak alongside all of you. So thank you to everyone who joined today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.